Sky Team, prepare for landing. This is a two-player, strictly two-player only, game in which one of you will be playing the pilot and one the co-pilot, and you will cooperate, it's a cooperative game, in order to land an airplane in a range of different airports. You start with Montreal, which is the training scenario, and then you have other scenarios with of increasing difficulty, with also more rules, different components, and so a lot of variety there. And those are some of the components that you will use for the advanced scenarios. Each airport has a different display, like here, and also have variants. So a lot of different places to explore and to learn about. Who knew? I learned something about landing in various airports around the world. So you have different airports to try. I set up the one for the intro scenario Montreal, and so the display for the airport where you're landing will go there, and will move down under the main display each time that you advance. Basically, we play a number of turns, and each turn the display here will advance by 0, 1, or 2 spaces. Sometimes you need to spend an extra turn in the air, so this one doesn't advance. Sometimes you gotta catch up, and so you need to move by 2. But again, very often you will want to move a single space per. Here, on the other hand, we have the altitude. It starts at 6,000, and this will move by 1,000 feet every turn. So this is your turn track. The speed of this doesn't change. You start the descent. Good luck! Because it's fun to land the airplane successfully, it's kind of remarkable what a good job the game does by not really pointing out what happens when you lose. And in my head, oh well, we're not gonna get a 5-star review, or you go down in a ball of flame, and let's not talk about that, because the game does a good job of not making you think about that. So why am I doing such a terrible job? So each player will have a screen, such as this one, and each player will roll 4 dice, regular 6-sided dice, behind their screen. And then you can discuss in very general terms how you feel about your roll, or some of the things that you can or cannot do. But then ultimately, players will alternate placing dice on this main display and resolving the effects of the space where they place them. And that turn track also tells you who goes first. The blue is the captain, so round 1 the captain goes first, round 2 the co-captain goes first, and so on and so forth. You will also receive some reroll tokens. There's one available to get on the game, one more than in a standard game or the Montreal. Yeah, the standard scenario you will receive. And so we alternate placing dice there. Now, some spaces have a requirement of who can place them. Blue is the captain, and yellow/orange is the co-captain. So only the captain can place dice here. Only the co-captain can place dice here. What do we do? Again, here there's a requirement for color and number. I can place a 5 or a 6 there, and if I do, blip, I will activate that system. And then the co-captain goes, for example, blip, they activate that, revealing the green area under that switch there. One of the conditions to win the game, you need to turn on all of these switches, so they all need to show green, their green light here. These, it's a very good idea for the captain to start braking, but you will check that how well you braked, how well you pulled the brake only at the end of the last round. The captain must place dice of that exact number in the value indicated there, and in order from left to right. When the captain does that, you turn on the switch and you move this other marker here. If later, probably in a later turn, the captain does that, then we move the marker there. What does that mean? That at the end of the last round, when we are landing, we need to check that our speed is not higher than the braking speed that we have achieved there. There are other airplanes sitting there in the way. We gotta get them out of the way. the captain and or co-captain can place dice of any value, but only of the indicated from the indicated player. And each time that you place a die there, you remove an airplane that it's in the way that number of spaces away. The captain places a 4 there. 1, 2, 3, 4. We remove that one. If there aren't any airplanes there, then nothing happens. Co-captain does that. 1, 2, 3. Remove that one. The timing can be important because remember you will also move, and so sometimes you want to move before you make a phone call, and you remove those because that will affect, of course, how many spaces away the airplanes in the way are. We want to keep the airplane kind of straight, usually, but not always. Sometimes we have to turn, meaning at some point during the turn, either player can place one there when it comes to the axis, a spot indicating the axis. And so, for example, the captain places it there. At some other point during the turn, the other player must also place a die in the axis space. If we place two dice of the same value, we do not change the orientation of the axis. However, if one of the two dice is higher than the other, as soon as we have the two dice from the axis placed there, we need to check if there's a change. Again, same value, nothing changes. If a value is higher, we pull the axis by one tick in the direction of the higher die for each value that one is higher than the other. So, for example, if I put a 6 there and we were there, that's like a wee boom. That's pretty bad. It's entirely possible to completely crash the airplane if indeed the indicator for the axis reaches one of these two spaces with the X. But let's not do that. Let's not do that. Why would you not want to always keep it straight? Sometimes you can't because the dice don't allow you to keep it straight. And some of the times, some of the scenarios, you need to take a turn to the left, for example. And so suppose this is how we start our turn. Our passengers are probably not feeling too good. And these are the dice that are placed. Again, as soon as the second of these two dice is placed, then we reconcile the axis based on the difference between the two dice. Something similar happens with speed, meaning you check the speed and you potentially advance whenever the two players have placed dice here. And these 4 dice are mandatory. Each player must place a die in the axis spot and a die in the engine spot. The way we check that is pretty simple. After we place the second die of the set here, we check where the total is. If the total is higher than the orange mark you see there, then we advance by 2 spaces. If that would be the case right now because we are at 9 and 9 is on that side of that orange indicator there. If you're in between, for example, 7, we advance by 1 space. If we are lower than that, lower than the blue indicator there, we don't advance at all. We're still there in the air. Advancing means, again, just as a reminder, sliding down this display here, this template here, by the corresponding number of spaces. Something I should have mentioned earlier, and I didn't because I forgot, is when we turn on one of these switches, we move the corresponding marker by 1 space. So when the captain turns on one of these switches, we move that marker up by 1. When the co-captain turns on one of these switches, we move that marker up. Now remember, we must turn them all on before the end of the last turn, so that means that as the game progresses, it'll become easier not to move at all and harder to move 2 spaces. So we're slowing down, so that makes sense, but you have to take that into account. What else? You can always play a die here, no requirements based on player or value, and if you place any one die there, then you make some coffee. You place a coffee token there, you can have up to 3, no more, and whenever a player uses a die, you can spend a coffee to change the value of a die by the corresponding number, plus or minus 1. You can use multiple ones to have bigger changes. And so, for example, to turn a 3 into a 2, so I can put it there, turn on that one, and I will move that marker by 1, but I already did that. So we need to clear, get the heck out. If we move into a spot that still has an airplane in it, suppose that we're there, that's the situation, we place our engine dice there, we advance, bad. In order to win, we need to have cleared everything and to have reached, there you go. We need to add that situation when that altitude indicator, also the turn track, reaches that, we need to be there. It's possible actually to be higher up and then simply to catch up. It's possible, but we want to have that situation at some point. When we have that situation, we need to have all of the systems, all the systems have been turned on, so they're showing green on all sides. And remember, we need to have cleared all the airplanes there. And during the turn where we have the situation where we finally land, we need to have the axis perfectly straight. And our speed for the last turn only needs to be lower than the number indicated by the braking speed. That's why the captain needs to probably have done the whole thing. You could potentially land with less than full braking, but it's going to be challenging. So you're going to keep a good speed throughout the game, but then you want to have a really low speed the last turn, because again, it needs to not exceed the number indicated by the braking marker. It seems like a lot, but there's more, because other scenarios will require other things that you need to do. Weird turns that you need to do. Keep track that you don't run out of fuel. Keep track. There's an intern with you and you want the intern to get a good training. A lot of different situations, a lot of different other requirements, but all very doable. And this is how you play SkyTeam. So recently we went on a family trip, and this is a game that I picked up in my friendly local game store because I wanted something that looked light, both in terms of game design and physically, to bring on a trip with me. Matter of fact, there is some air in the box, and so I stored smaller games like Trio inside this box here. Maybe I shouldn't have chosen a game where airplanes crash and people die horrendously so often when we were traveling. Somehow that didn't bother us, because I need to point that out. The game does a really good job of keeping the situation, the negative outcome abstract. It's all about these beautiful luminous images, people staring into the distance, the fun of landing. And if you lose, you think, okay, I lost. That's the way it is. Tons of scenarios. So again, for a travel game, so we were away from the house for a while. A lot of replay value here, because just by changing a rule or two, adding a little components, changing the little display of where we're trying to land, now all of a sudden we had to turn one way and then another, worry about different circumstances, make sure that the intern is engaged. You can't just ask the intern to make coffee. The intern has to learn new stuff. There are a couple of interesting things like this. You wonder how does that happen? It happens very effectively and very elegantly. The game has a lot of different ways to represent the theme in a way that feels detailed enough, but not too much. So balls of fire don't really become part of the experience. Detailed enough and thematic enough. I learned some things about how to land in different airports, which is just amazing. I like to learn new stuff, although I'm not likely to really need it at any point. Most importantly, the game is fun, not just thematic and surprisingly so. The game is fun with really nice, interesting decisions. With some of the scenarios where you need to use the dice to do multiple things, I was afraid the space of decision was going to be too small, but somehow magically it is, and I felt that I had just the right balance between what I could do and the limitations of the system, so that made my decisions feel meaningful. I felt that I had control, although it's dice based. Again, you had different order in which you can place your dice, those coffee tokens that allow you to do different things. And ultimately, delegating, maybe I don't need to put a specific number. The fact that the dice for the axes need to be the same die, or it's about the difference, not about high or low. Lot of interesting decisions there, and it's okay for a little bit. We are flying not straight for a while. There goes our 5-star review, I guess, but everybody may still have a chance of landing safely. Lot of interesting decisions. Now, of course, the challenge is in playing without communicating, and I played the game mainly with my 12-year-old. The kid just fell in love with the game. I played with other family members also, of course, only one at a time. But it was the 12-year-old who wanted to play it all the time, and we went through so many scenarios, and we were talking. We were talking probably and planning more than allowed by the rules, but guess what? It's my game. I paid for it, and that's one of the beauties of physical games. You can just reprogram them, you can mod them, you can change them any way you want. We played it with more talking than describing the rules, and we had a great time. We loved it, but of course you can also play it as tight, as rigidly as you would like it to be. And some of the later scenarios are definitely challenging, so it was us playing and chatting a little bit about our decisions. Nobody got hurt. Quite the opposite. We had a great time. So Sky Team is a game that I want to point that out. Some of the scenarios may be challenging, but the fix, the tweak to make it so that you can play it satisfactorily even with young players, with family members, is very simple. Talk a little bit more. It's all good. The game is so thematic, so elegant, and so fun. So many interesting tiny decisions. Placing dice all the time, it means that maybe a single die roll, there will be that one time that is just crazy and you lose the game because of that. But overall, you're going to have so many decisions around so many die rolls that I felt that luck was not driving the experience, rather strategy and indirect communication, and in our cases, a little bit of communication. Sky Team, very impressed. This is a fun cooperative game. I definitely enjoyed playing it, and so did my 12-year-old.